This week on Quality Digest Live, we consider transition planning for ISO 45001.
Plus, is there a return on investment in simply having fun?
Hey, there you go.
There we go. Well, we'll find out when we come back. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 19th, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
Yes, you are, actually. Yeah, there you go. And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. Well, you know, a very interesting piece that we ran this week explores a potential merger and its ramifications on two huge and interrelated customer-facing sectors, health insurance and pharmacy retailers. CVS merger with Aetna, Healthcare Cure or Curse, is the name of the article which appeared in Tuesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. And the article was written by Sharona Hoffman, and she's a professor of health law and bioethics at Case Western Reserve University, and as such, she's uniquely qualified to look at the pros and cons of this proposed deal for consumers. At first, we can kind of, Dirk, maybe run through the pros. She ran through these in some detail, but I'm going to kind of shortcut my way through them. But okay. She ran through the pros and the cons potentially of this deal for customers, for consumers. The first one she mentions is negotiating power. Now, customers of this combine may, and that's a key term here, they may see lower prices that CVS Aetna could negotiate on drugs and medical devices. The second one she mentions is no middleman. Now, CVS owns Caremark, and Caremark is a pharmacy benefits manager. It's a type of business that administers drug benefit programs for health plans. However, companies like Caremark often get discounts on drugs, but do not pass those along to customers. So there's some thought that by cutting out this middleman, which the deal would accomplish, that CVS Aetna could generate more savings for customers. The third thing that she mentions is easier access. CVS already offers what it calls minute clinics, which are staffed by nurse practitioners. This deal would allow not only an expansion of these services, but also corresponding coverage for relatively minor complaints, as well as the convenience of one-stop shopping. That's a good thing. Fourth thing is improved data analytics, and combining information available from a patient's insurer with his or her pharmacy could allow the better monitoring of certain conditions, if that data is managed properly.
Well, there is that.
Don't know, did you happen to see the story about Aetna that just came out a little while ago? Well, I mean, for those of you who aren't aware, just came out yesterday, I think early this morning. Aetna had a little boo-boo. They mailed in a very large window envelope very sensitive information.
We got it right there.
There you go. Yep. To 12,000 of their customers, very sensitive information about HIV medications.
Right.
That these customers were in need of. And ironically, I'm going to read this right here because I just printed it out. Ironically, Aetna's mailing was an attempt to address privacy concerns raised in two lawsuits filed in 2014 and 2015. The company had wanted customers to get their HIV medications exclusively from mail order pharmacies rather than retail pharmacies. Customers objected, saying that using the mail could breach their privacy.
And so what happens?
So they, in addressing that, they wrote a letter to these 12,000 people in which they breach their privacy by exposing their HIV status in a big window.
In a big window, yeah.
So improved data analytics are a great thing if you can manage it properly.
It was such a, I mean, we talk about high-tech data breaches all the time, and this is like about as low-tech as you could go.
Plastic window.
Oh my gosh.
All right, well, as for the potential cons of this, besides that one of this merger, the first one is increased costs. If indeed there are fewer pharmacy benefit managers, as we've mentioned in the pros section of this list, the reduced competition might lead again to a rise in some pricing. Also less choice. Aetna could require its customers to fill their prescriptions at CVS pharmacies exclusively. It could also force visits to CVS minute clinics by limited coverage for more expensive full-service doctor options. That's a worry. And then there's the higher barrier to entry. A CVS Aetna behemoth may make it harder for new companies to break into the drug retail business, especially if Aetna, again, it's only going to cover medicines filled at CVS stores. And it should be noted that the CVS-Aetna merger, and technically actually CVS is acquiring Aetna for a tidy sum of $77 billion. It's still under consideration by regulatory bodies.
For those reasons listed above.
Many of those, right. Yeah. And this is considered a vertical as opposed to a horizontal merger. In other words, the companies merging provide different yet complementary services for customers rather than overlapping ones. And in theory, vertical mergers don't restrict competition and consumer choice in the same degree as horizontal ones. Now, of course, the Trump administration, as many of you are aware, is currently opposing another vertical merger in a different space between AT&T and Time Warner. So predictions like resistance might be futile, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I mean, mergers are always a big thing with regulatory bodies.
To me, I see a lot. I mean, I know the concerns. I think the only of the cons, the only one I think that's realistic, and is usually why you look at monopolistic stuff, is that are you Xing out other businesses from getting into the same thing? The other two, I'm honestly not all that concerned with, but from a government point of view, they're always trying to make sure you don't get a monopoly, and this definitely could potentially hurt other competitors.
They don't want to limit consumer choice. That's really a key thing that the Justice Department, the SEC always looks at, is our consumers going to get a fair shake and be able to use their power as consumers to get the best deal.
That's right. Okay. Next article has to do with ISO 45001. In his article, Transitioning to ISO 45001, author Ishmael Belmares reminds us that workplace safety is a vital concern for every organization. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2.9 million non-fatal workplace injuries and illnesses were reported by private industry employers in 2016. The costs to those employers was tens of billions, with a B, tens of billions of dollars. So it's a big deal. In March of this year, the leading certification standard for occupational health and safety, OHSAS 18001 or OSAS 18001, is changing to ISO FDIS 45001. For those of you who will need to make the transition from 18001 to 45001, you will find actually a lot of common between the two programs, which is great, but there are also a few key differences. And here to talk about ISO 45001 is the author of that article, Ishmael Belmares. Hi, Ishmael.
Hi, good morning. Hopefully everyone's doing well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, let's get right to it. First of all, why did we have the change from ISO 18001 to, OSAS 18001 to ISO 45001?
Yeah, most of these standards, whether we're talking about ISO 9000 standards or other standards, get revised every few years. And the last time 18,000 had been revised was back in 2007. So it was basically time to revise it. Also, the ISO organization felt that the standard was mature enough now, as opposed back in the 1990s, to make it an actual ISO 9000 standard. I mean, actual ISO standard. So in this case, the next numbering scheme for management system standards is 45001. Also, by making it an ISO standard, it now will follow the same rules as all the other ISO standards. So they get revised at a specified frequency. They also fall under the guidance of IAF, the International Accreditation Forum. And so it's a much more controlled standard by converting it from basically an independent standard to an ISO standard.
So Ishmael, you mentioned in your article that there's a number of key changes that we know between OSAS 18001 and ISO 45001. I'm sorry, there's a number of similarities, but what are some of the key differences that people really need to be aware of?
The first change, just like all the rest of the management system standards, has to follow the high-level structure. Basically, the numbering scheme for all management system standards, whether we're talking about ISO 9000, ISO 14000, now ISO 45000, they all follow the same numbering scheme. So where management or leadership is the same clause in all of them. So if an organization is certified to multiple standards, it follows the same structure. And people don't have to relearn a new structure every time they look at a different standard. So all the management systems. So that's the first change that's being done. The next part of that, the same as the high-level structure, there are certain things like business context. Where does the organization fit in the overall industry. One of the bigger changes from that thing is the need of expectations of the workers and other interested parties. So the interested party come in there, but one of the things it does identify is the workers themselves throughout the standard, and the emphasis there as far as communication, getting input, getting their buy-in to make sure you have a successful system. Next from that is the framework incorporates what we call the plan, do, check, act concept as far as continual improvement. The leadership commitment is also in there, just like in the other standards. And then also one of the things that it does under management leadership, it also talks about protecting the workers from reprisals. So the things that we've seen, in laws and things like that, not only in the U.S. but in others, if there is a whistleblower, he is protected, and that is actually part of the standard now. So apart from that, of course, like I said, participation and consultation of the workers. The ones that know the dangers or the issues out in the field when they're in an organization are the workers themselves. So the management and the organization has to take their input into account. One other one is the management change. Management of change is now required by the standard. So anytime there's a change, how is that being communicated? How is it being documented? What type of training goes into effect? Those type of issues have to be in a formalized way and make sure that everybody understands that within the organization. And then one of another item in there is the performance evaluations. How is the system working? And there are some specific requirements of that. If you're used to the other management system standards, that's not really new to the other management system standards, but it is slightly new to the ISO 45001.
Okay, and so what should you've listed a bunch of differences, so it sounds like there's a lot of things people need to be aware of during this transition. What should they be doing right now to prepare for this? What's maybe the most important thing they need to have on their plate right now to address?
One of the main things is go ahead and get a copy of the standard itself. Right now we are at FDIS. It was issued in November, so it's out there. You can actually purchase it from ISO and sometimes also from the local or national organizations. Get a copy of that. In March, the international standard will be issued. That's the final standard itself. It'll be issued in March of this year, 2018. So the first thing is get a copy of that, read through it, try to understand everything in there, and then also maybe look for some training or some seminars or sessions that you can go to and try to get some information from them, because every time you read one of these standards, there's always a question about interpretation. What does this really mean? So try to get some training out there if you can, whether that's through an official or formal training or just a information session or something like that, where you're able to talk to other people and see. And if you can network in those situations, that'd be great on how other people are trying to address some of these requirements. From that, of course, then you have to perform internal training and that's very special, or you should, of course, concentrate on management itself, because a lot of the requirements, it has to start at the top, and then also your internal audits, and then also anybody else responsible for segments of the standard itself for implementing that standard. From that, then perform a gap analysis, and then also include in that gap analysis documentation. Of course, a lot of it, they say, well, a manual is not required. It doesn't really say, but it does require documented information, just like the other standards. In documented information, you're going back to records and procedures or work instructions. Make sure that you include the documentation that is required by the standard, and any other documentation that you as an organization has identified that you need. And then also perform your internal audits. Now, this is, you need to really develop a timeline. There will be a transition period. IAF will publish those probably at the same time that the standard is issued. And there'll be a couple of documents and guidance in IAF. And what I mean by IAF is International Accreditation Forum. you can go to their website and get some of the mandatory documents there.
And we should say that if you're interested in learning even more about this as part of your preparation, we're going to be having a webinar on this topic. That's we and DNV are presenting a webinar called Transitioning to ISO 45001, How to Get Started, just what we were talking about, on Tuesday, January 23rd at the special time, not our usual time, of 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. So remember that if you go to our webinars a lot, we're not starting at 11 a.m. Pacific, we're starting at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. And Ishmael Bemeres, who we were just talking with, will be your presenter, and I'll be hosting. So keep an eye on your email inbox for an invitation, and go ahead and register for that event if you haven't already done so. Ishmael, thanks for joining us this morning.
It was a pleasure.
All right, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we will.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend. Bye. Yeah, as you can see, he's got a wealth of information at his fingertips.
It'll be a good webinar.
Yeah, it should be a really good webinar. A lot of you have signed up for it already, so check that one out.
All right.
All right, Dirk, let's talk about having fun.
I like having fun.
You're a fun kind of guy.
I'm going to have fun this weekend.
You're a fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
Mushroom.
A little mushroom.
You know, all that kind of stuff.
I live in the dark.
There you go. There you go. Well, the ROI of having fun is not just what we're having fun with now. It's actually the article that we ran in Quality Digest by Dave Crenshaw. It appeared in the Thursday SIFT issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. And you know, it initially ran on the Thought Leaders blog, which is one that we run, that we use a lot. That's Mike Figliolo's blog, I think. It is one that we do quite often.
I should point out that's broken. So,
oh.
Which is why we have this here.
You never know. Well, you know, we all talk about the need for individuals and organizations to be effective and to be more productive and all those kinds of things. But you know, generally speaking, we don't really talk that much about fun and the idea that you want to also make your organizations be basically have a good time and enjoy the work that they do, and have the employees there be engaged in what you're doing. And by doing that, you can have more fun and take more breaks. Those are ways of having that happen. Now, this goes right along with the findings in an MIT Sloan, you might remember this, Dirk, an MIT Sloan executive education story that we ran last month in December.
Right.
We talked about that, and we covered it on the show as well. Now, according to that piece, people are most creative and they're engaged if they get short breaks, like every hour. I think they said every 75 minutes.
Right, and
like
not
that.
Only a break, but get away from your electronics.
That's right.
Leave your
Go
phone,
for a walk.
leave your
Right,
iPad.
right.
Yeah, right.
Have a planning session over
Right.
coffee, whatever it may be. Just get your mind out of that.
Just your guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it takes. Well, now adding to that perspective is Crenshaw's piece, which is that there's a huge differentiator in fun in kind of in the battle for talent. I mean, he cites polls that state that nearly 60% of U.S. workers don't enjoy their chosen job. I thought that was interesting. And that number soars to more than 70% for employees that are age 30 to 39, those in their 30s. So a lot of people out there who really don't enjoy what they're doing. They don't enjoy their chosen job or their chosen career. Now, needless to say, I think it's a major problem. I mean, it's a major problem for several reasons. First, as mentioned, employees that are unhappy at their current company, well, they're kind of ripe to be plucked by maybe one of your more fun-loving competitors, right?
Stolen from you. Yeah.
Sure, I mean, that happens all the time. Second is that disengaged employees don't really contribute many, if any, ideas to their employers, even if they do stay, right? And then finally, people that really dislike going to work just aren't as good or aren't as productive at their jobs as their happier brethren. I mean, it kind of makes sense. You're kind of dreading going in. You really don't want to do more than the bare minimum.
Right.
You may not even want to do the bare minimum. I mean, you really don't like what you're doing. And again, if somebody else comes in, sweeps in with even if it's just as good of an offer, but it seems like a more fun environment, you know, maybe they have a foosball table in there, which we should do, by the way.
Or beer.
Or beer, whatever. You know, these things really make a difference. So to combat this problem, Crenshaw recommends injecting a shot of fun into the workday, starting with multiple breaks. And that's one thing that's really key here. Now, this isn't just pointless goofing off, as he points out in his piece. These are carefully planned and managed breaks to maximize creativity, engagement, and overall effectiveness. Now, beyond these short and regular daily breaks, there's really a lot of benefits to regular, and he says like even monthly, kind of fun team events. And that could be maybe a couple of hours, it can be maybe even a full day where you just get, again, like you said, get out of your normal headspace of looking into that little computer or tablet or whatever and do something different, you know? team building is a great thing. I mean, there's things you can do to shake that up.
I agree with this monthly thing.
Yeah.
I think organized, if I'm understanding what he's saying right,
Yeah.
that the daily breaks got to be some sort of organized, creative event.
No, the daily breaks don't have to be. The monthly things should be more kind of organized, team building type things for a couple hours. But the daily things can just be, get up, walk around.
Just your own choice. Okay.
Your own choice. Well, you got to clear with the managers, of course. But but the
I
daily
thought it was kind
ones,
of like management organized breaks. Hey,
no,
we're gonna
calisthenics, like that could work too. Maybe. I mean, whatever works. But I mean, no. Basically, the monthly ones are more organized. The daily things are just a couple minutes here and there just to clear your head out. And now, let's be honest. I mean, if you ask a lot of managers to measure on a scale of 1 to 10 the importance of having fun at work, many, if not most, would probably rank it like as a -5. But there just isn't a cultural awareness in the vast majority of cases for the value of workers really just enjoying their jobs. But if you, again, consider from the perspective of holding on to your best people and getting their best efforts while you're there, it's really something that you want to consider. There's one more thing here. I mean, anyone, as Crenshaw says here, can really light this fire in his or her organization, whatever your role may be. I mean, you can take steps to embrace fun. Obviously, now if you're an executive, you can easily spread that culture to your direct reports. That's fairly easy to do. Say, hey, you're gonna have fun, whether you want to or not.
Right.
If you're a middle manager, you can kind of support those that work for you and have your teams kind of do that and have some fun. And if if you're a regular just line worker, whatever it may be, you can advocate for yourself. You can advocate for your teammates. You can say, hey, we're going to take a little break. We're going to go for a quick little walk here, and we're going to clear our heads out, and we're going to come back with a little more energy and a little more focus. I mean, you can do that from the top down. You can do it from the bottom up. It doesn't really matter, but the idea is you want to be conscious of it. And Crenshaw's saying that there's just not a consciousness of it in the DNA of many companies, and that's a really good point, I think. I mean, you want to have that attitude if you can in your company.
These monthly, I worked for a company that did pretty often schedule fun events, whether they were company picnics or whatever, but it wasn't management who did it. There were people, I was one of them, there was a team of us that just liked doing that, but because we were rank and file, we kind of knew what everybody liked to do. And management was cool. It was kind of like, can you guys do like a picnic or something or some sort of event? And it was just kind of like, and here's your budget. And it's like, it was up to us. And so those events were really well attended and they were a lot of fun because it was something that came from those of us who were on the shop floor. We kind of knew what everybody would dig doing. And so, and management was cool in terms of, you guys do it, whatever you want to do, here's your budget, knock yourselves out. And those worked really well.
Or softball teams. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do that may not even interfere necessarily in the workday that would really kind of bring your team together and just have more fun and more team pride in the organization. Those are great things to do. So consider that. Really good article there.
Well, talking about fun, my fun thing that I like to do is look at
technology.
So we have a Tech Corner coming up. If you use stereo microscopes for inspection or up-close manufacturing work, you already know the value of stereo microscopes. You also probably know some of the shortcomings of spending all day hunched over a microscope with your face stuck down into the eyepiece. If you've done that for any period of time, you know that it's not the most comfortable way to work for a long period of time. So this week's Tech Corner looks at a couple types of stereo microscopes that you're probably already familiar with, and one very unique, very ergonomic stereo microscope that some of you may not have seen before. Yesterday we had Craig Smith of Vision Engineering in our studio to run us through two traditional microscopes that you might be familiar with, as well as the very cool Lynx Evo. And in order to get a better show of the microscopes, this segment was actually pre-recorded yesterday with Craig. So take a look. And we're here today with Craig Smith of Vision Engineering, and we're going to be looking at 3 different microscopes from Vision Engineering, right?
Yes, what we're looking at today are stereo microscope line.
Stereo microscopes, okay.
We're involved in all things optical inspection, but this is specifically stereo. They're working scopes for people that would be manipulating things underneath them or something of that nature, spending a lot of time. The scope far down on your right is a Greeno style.
Okay.
Very, very common. From the front, you'll see it has a very distinct V shape to it. And it's kind of a compact, kind of squat little body. And if you'd like to go ahead and lean in there and see if you can get that set up.
So first of all, I got to kind of get these to
My eye spacing might be a little bit wider than what yours
so
is.
basically I'm looking to align, okay, so I got a stereo vision here, okay.
There you go.
Oh, that's not too bad, and then my focus is over here, right? Okay.
Either side.
Yep, okay, oh, okay, easy.
And once you get it in focus, if you just be so kind as to stay there for 8 hours, you could see what the process would be of actually using that over a shift.
Because you know I loved leaning over for, for 8 hours a day.
You look good doing it.
Yeah.
So that becomes
So
kind of
ergonomically, these
are challenged.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if you're only going to use it for a short period of time, every couple of days or so, it's fine for the right application. That's really what becomes important, is finding the right scope for the right application.
Okay.
And it's possibly not even a microscope. Maybe a bench magnifier would do it as well, and that would be very ergonomic and good for the operator. The balance there is, does that have enough magnification? It's finding the balance for the right application that's important.
Okay, so for something like this, this is not a tool that you would want to be soldering under all day long or inspecting under all day long, just simply because of the hunched over positions.
I don't think you were there for 30 seconds. I think you were happy enough to lean back and have the conversation.
I definitely can. I can feel it in the back of my neck, yeah.
There you go.
Okay, and there's a step up from this, which is a little bit better ergonomically, right?
Yeah, this becomes the next step in the line. This is a CMO style scope, or CMO. This is our SX80. And what you'll see, it's characterized by a longer, straighter body. This has an added feature of having tiltable eyepieces. Typically, it would have fixed eyepieces similar to the SX45 that you just looked at. So you can kind of better position those and get it set up. So if you'd like to go ahead and take a look at that.
So this is, already I'm not hunched over. I can sit up a little bit taller.
Big benefit as far as your back, although you do see, well, I see at this point, you are starting to hunch over anyways, although just not to the extent that was required for.
Yeah, I mean, this feels fairly reasonable. I mean, better than the other one for sure. Just get my line. Okay, yeah.
Being that you're more upright, you'd be in a position that you could work underneath the scope, soldering or something of that nature, for a much longer period of time before it would become.
So is the main advantage of this one? I mean, they both do the same thing, but just that it's adjustability, so to speak. I mean.
Yes, primarily. Now, being that it's a CMO style, that's also considered infinity corrected. That's to say that both light paths are parallel inside the scope.
Okay.
So we can actually add accessories such as a camera tube or something like that at a later time, because you have that vertical stack that's, again, parallel.
Okay. So we've gone from something that's not very ergonomic at all to something that you could conceivably, and I'm sure it's probably something like this that you might see on an electronics line where maybe they're having to do solder. I mean, this would be a kind of a typical microscope, a stereo microscope you might see?
Correct. And as I say, we're moving up in the line, and not surprisingly, we're moving up in price point as well as we do that.
Okay.
Well, before we move on, there's one last thing we should really address with the two scopes that we've looked at so far. And it's something that's not often really discussed with microscopes because it's a limitation that all stereo microscopes have by design. And that is the eyepieces. If we actually pull out this eyepiece, take a look at that real quick, you'll see that that represents a sizable piece of glass.
Sure, okay.
But what the operator actually gets relative to information to their pupil is significantly different. The actual exit pupil of all traditional microscopes is only about 3 millimeters.
Oh, right,
and when you're using the scope, your pupil will dilate up to 5 millimeters, a significant difference. And that's really why you have to spend so much time adjusting the scope as well. You had to move those eyepieces back and forth so that you match that 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter exit pupil to your pupil in your eye. And if you moved while you were using the scope, you lost the image completely, which is really unfortunate to have happen if you're doing something such as soldering.
True.
Kind of like to know what you're touching. So that's truly something to look at relative to that style of scope. Okay, moving on. This becomes our flagship product. This also is a CMO style scope. We've got a longer stacked body, as you can see as you're in front of it. And it may not look like a stereo microscope, but it is in fact purely a stereo microscope. There's nothing being digitally processed or anything else.
So this isn't a video screen I'm looking at?
Correct.
It's all optical?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you get far enough back from the scope, you'll actually see that it does have the two eye paths that make it stereo.
Yep. I can see
the right
it.
and the left.
Yep.
And if you'll just kind of lean in and take a look.
Well, it's really clear display, I'll tell you that much. Interesting. So this is optical.
Yes.
Wow.
Not digital at all. So if you move your hand, you have instant feedback.
Which is kind of funky because I'm looking at what feels like I'm looking at a screen, and yet it is definitely stereo.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
trip.
So as opposed to a camera that historically cameras would be ergonomic, but
Right.
camera is going to be mono. And based on the speed of the camera, you might have a lag time as you try and do something underneath the scope. This being purely optical, if you move your fingernail, you see that happen. You get operator feedback.
Yeah.
The other thing that you'll notice is you've kind of moved your head in and out, kind of playing with it.
Yeah.
You have great freedom of posture as positioning. It's giving you good posture. Your back is straight, your neck is erect, and you can move in and out as needed. You have peripheral vision. You can look around and see the rest of the world. Your pupils aren't dilating as you're using the scope. Yeah. And I would suggest if you needed to, you could sit here and look at that for a fair amount of time, where the other two would be fatiguing at best.
I would say that
at worst.
As somebody who doesn't use this and just as a casual observer, I would say that it seems like it has the benefits of, let's say, a camera-based system in that you've got essentially, let's say, call it a screen for lack of a better words, but because it's an optical system, I'm still getting the full benefits of stereo vision. So it's kind of a trip.
Not only that, but there's actually, as you notice, there's no adjustments to make to the eyepieces. So when you came up to the scope, you're instantly using the scope.
Right.
You don't have to make physical contact with it with the eye cups that you might at a traditional microscope. You could go from one operator to another to say, hey, take a look at this. I'm looking at this on the scope, and there's not that lag time of, well, let me get the pieces set so that I can see through the scope. You can go from person. In fact, somebody can likely look over your shoulder right now and get a pretty good idea of what you're looking at.
Right. That's interesting. And obviously, focus, all the same stuff you would get with a regular microscope.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, functionality-wise, it works functionally the same as a stereo microscope. The difference is you've got this cool kind of screen that you're looking at. Okay. And I've noticed also we're in a pretty brightly lit studio here, and I noticed that still no problem with making out detail. It's still nice and bright.
Again, it's purely optical, so there's no loss of light levels. There's no washout that you might get with a camera. There's nothing to try and tweak to make it a little bit better. It is what it was, and it's going to stay that way.
What is the kind of the target market for this? Who is most interested in this type of setup?
So this is exactly what we kind of hit on. Somebody that's going to sit in front of the scope for long periods of time. If you had to do an 8-hour shift and you were working on, again, we talked about soldering. If you're going to be working on circuit boards or something, this is something that you can kind of reposition yourself without losing the image. You can be in a comfortable position. You can adjust your chair or the scope. And being a modular design, we talked about the infinity correction. We could put in camera attachments or step magnifiers to increase the magnification or change the working distance. It becomes a modular design that we can configure accordingly for the operator's needs.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, that's very cool. Very cool.
You can prove my point by just standing there for another, or sitting there for another 8 hours and see how you feel. Or we can actually, maybe we could pull one of the other scopes back, and I'll use the Evo and you can use the traditional scope, and we'll kind of do a blink test as to who can be there longest.
So this is the Lynx Evo.
Correct.
It's kind of the top of the line of your stereo microscope products. Frame size, is this the smallest, largest?
The head is the head. It's available, and when we say the head, it's the structure that we're looking at here.
Okay.
We do have different stands that are available for it, different configurations. Again, different lenses for different working distances of magnification. It's a modular design that we can fit to the operator or the customer's needs.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, Lynx Evo from Vision Engineering, Craig Smith.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you showing us to it.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks again to Craig Smith of Vision Engineering for coming out to the studio yesterday and showing us those stereo microscopes. You guys did a great job. You guys really did a great job. Craig did an awesome job.
Really can see the difference between using one and using the next, I tell you.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Very nicely done Tech Corner by you guys, and Chris Smith. Very nice job producing that as well for us. Thanks for that. All right, well, that's our show. Before we go, we should also let you know that we have a webinar next week, and thank Ismail Belmarez for joining us via Skype, as he did about 15 minutes ago. Ismail and Dirk right here are going to be doing a webinar together called Transitioning to ISO 45001, How to Get Started. The event is on Tuesday, January 23rd, this coming Tuesday, at the special time. Don't forget, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. So coffee and bagels with Quality Digest and DNV.
That's right.
On Tuesday. So mark your calendars now, and also keep your eye on your email inbox for your invitation to what's sure to be a really great webinar, and a lot of you have signed up for that already. So check that one out. So you guys all have a great weekend. Thank you, Dirk, again for all your great work.
Hey, you too, buddy.
Good job, man,
hey,
as always on that Tech Corner.
Okay.
We'll see you all next week.
So long.
Bye.